Okay, great. Yes, so thank you all for attending. So let me start off by saying that it's no secret that science is facing a reproducibility crisis. One of the many important factors is the supporting information that is supposed to be disseminated with, let's say, a paper or something such as code, context, such as parameters for an algorithm or instrumentation, etc., are often left out. And this is one of the reasons why it's difficult to reproduce research these days. Software containers have certainly helped in facilitating portability of really complex software stacks, and things like Jupyter notebooks have helped integrate equations, plots, and markdown, etc., to explain the entire workflow for data analytics. This is all excellent, but we certainly do need a lot more, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm here to talk about a system that we're developing that is going to facilitate reproducibility in scientific research through end-to-end and federated data management. Okay, so modern research projects today are becoming are driven largely by larger and multidisciplinary teams spread across the globe, meaning that not only is our research investigations distributed temporally, they're also distributed geographically as well. Experiments are becoming ever more complex, and continual development of instrumentation, whether it is supercomputing or observational instruments, as you can see in the plots in this slide, have driven an explosion in the data volume. And while you might think that this is great, that you're getting larger data volumes and data velocity, so you can train your AI models a lot more easily, but I'd like to ask everybody to pause and remind everybody that often this scientific data is rather poorly labeled or is not labeled at all. And it is a Herculean effort to manually label or manually add context to the point where such data is either reusable for the scientists themselves or even enable cool AI applications. So if you really do want to reproduce other people's research and enable cool AI applications, why aren't we capturing the context today? That is a question that we asked ourselves. And to answer that, let me show you an example plot right here. This is about the relative time spent on in synchrotron sources, if I'm not wrong, on the relative time spent on experiment design, data management, performing the actual measurements themselves, and post-processing. We can gather a lot of insights from this plot alone, but the one I want to draw your attention to is the bars in green, which are shown right here. When what you can tell is that the time spent on data management was in 2015 projected to rise exponentially with time, unlike all the other categories. And you would ask, well, why is only this category increasing with time? And the answer to that, in my opinion, is because that has to do a lot with the time and energy it takes to manage data. And it takes so long to manage data and a lot of energy to manage data simply because we are limited by the tools that we have for data management. And as a consequence, we result to ad hoc practices. And many examples of these are, metadata is not completely captured when you're running experiments. And if it is captured, it's in the form of physical notebooks or electronic notebooks. And the notebooks are often not reconciled with the raw data after the experiments. And the Windows File Explorer and the Mac Finder have become our de facto data management systems. And they pretty much define the way we manage, we search, we organize, and share our information that we collect. For example, we embed metadata into the file paths, such as temperature underscore 375 Kelvin underscore pressure underscore something, so on and so forth, so that we can find the information using these primitive tools. We continue to share data over emails, Dropbox links, and Google Drive, and even portable storage drives, even as of 2020. And when we rarely do publish data sets, and when we do, we publish only that which supports the paper, and overwhelming majority of data remains unpublished, which means we can't take advantage of either our own data or other people's data, leading to this so-called problem of dark data. And to figure out how best to address these challenges, we decided to take a step back and look at the life cycle of the data sets themselves. So we wanted to develop infrastructure that would solve the problems at every single stage of the data life cycle. So the way we see it is that we need a tool to capture and reconcile the raw data and context after experiments, whether they are observations or simulations or data analytics. And then we need another tool to help researchers manage data, which means search, organize, sharing, and so on and so forth. And then we need analytics tools for us to look into the data, to visualize it, and to use different machine learning and deep learning algorithms to analyze our data. And obviously, we should also be cognizant that we should, capture the context as well as the data products, the secondary data products produced by such analytics. And near the very end, we do still need another tool to publish the data and the context and retain them for long term, so that either some of the researchers can reuse the data and context, or the insights would be used by other people to hypothesize new experiments and then fuel newer research investigations. So to answer the infrastructural questions that we pose to ourselves, this is the simplified schematic of the overall system that we are developing at Oak Ridge National Lab. Right now, I'll just give you a quick overview of the different components and show you how they fit with each other, and then I'll get into the details in subsequent slides. So each of these facilities here represents a facility or a research group, and or in this case, an individual researcher. And all these facilities will be connected to each other via our primary component of our system, which is called DataFed, which is a scalable scientific data management system. It forms the backbone or the data backplane of the entire system. And basically we transport information in a performant manner using Globus's grid FTP. And DataFed also, most importantly, allows people to search, share, organize, and do other things, and such as the data management of data sets. And I'll get into this stuff into details in a little bit later. So supercomputers right here and cloud infrastructure producing simulation data analytics data, instruments producing observational data could all put their data into facility local repositories as shown right here. And smaller facilities such as the one shown in the top left box could maybe partner with a larger data or institution-wide facility where you could partner with the facility to store data in their repository. And the important key point that differentiates DataFed from prior scientific data management efforts is that DataFed federates these multiple geographically distributed repositories into one connected cohesive ecosystem, thereby preventing the typical problem of data getting siloed into disconnected repositories, and therefore you can't really mix and match data from multiple repositories. And DataFed also abstracts away the complexities such as physical locations and other details, engineering details behind the file systems, and lets users focus on the data and using data itself. Moving on, another component of our system is reproducible data analytics, which could be provided by a service of whatever the community chooses, such as in this case, we've chosen Jupyter Hub as an example, as shown right here. Facilities with instruments that are off the network, such as those at the Center for Nanophase Material Science, could use another component we're developing. It's called the data gateway, as shown right here. And this would essentially serve as a portal to other data services such as Jupyter Hub and DataFed, but also help in ingesting data and metadata that are produced from the instruments themselves. Those people who want to use the data ingest capability could also utilize a subsection of the DataFed's, Data Gateway's capabilities through this other service called the Virtual Data Gateway that I'm showing right here on the bottom right. And with this, I believe I've provided you a quick overview of the different components of the system, and I want to get into each of these components and talk about them in a little bit more detail. So quite often, what happens is that software for commercial instruments are incompatible with newer operating systems. And as a consequence, when these instruments are purchased, these computers are maintained as they arrive from the vendor, so they're kept off the network, so they're protected from malware. And as a result, researchers have to resort to copying data from these offline computers using portable storage drives. For these situations, we are developing this data gateway that I spoke about, which allows users to selectively and securely connect these offline instruments with the outside world. And when I say selectively, I'm talking about only allowing things that are absolutely necessary, such as the data management portal or a data analytics portal, if you will, and so on and so forth. And additionally, the data gateway also provides a web interface for researchers to sit at their instrument and enter metadata into simple web forms and drag and drop data. So when they hit upload, the data goes directly into a secure data-fed repository as shown right here. And then while sitting at the instrument itself, they can take advantage of data analytics resources and the data-fed portal to either manage the data or analyze the data without leaving the instrument itself. We have a prototype of this data gateway deployed at the Center for Nanophase Material Science. It's deployed onto 2 scanning probe microscopes, and we're in the process of developing additional features and deploying more gateways. And we are developing other features such as containers for standardizing and pre-processing data, whether it is transformation from proprietary formats to more standardized and open formats. Or we're also, like I said, working on the virtual gateway for as a centralized deployment for people outside these facilities to take advantage of these data ingest capabilities. We're also exposing the API that drives the data ingest capability of the gateway, so that users don't have to sit in front of experiments that take months or weeks, and the instrument can automatically inject data and metadata and upload it to a repository, so that the researchers don't have to come on site. And this is especially important for situations like what we're facing right now, which is COVID-19, where people can't come on site to perform their experiments. And additionally, speaking of COVID-19, another thing we have planned is remote control and monitoring of instruments, which is something that people really want these days. And other things are also in the pipeline, such as triggering compute jobs for data post-processing once data sets are uploaded onto maybe a data-fed repository or something like that. Moving on from data ingest to the next stage of the data lifecycle, which is data management. This is where data-fed comes in. Like I mentioned, it is a fully functional, scalable scientific data management system that facilitates really comprehensive data management. It provides unique identifiers for records, users, collections of records, and so on and so forth. And like I mentioned, it abstracts away the complexities of file systems such as directories and file paths. So those are things that we would never have to worry about. And it indexes not just the top-level metadata that file systems do, which are like the author, the creation date, and the provenance graph, and so on and so forth, but it also, most importantly, captures and indexes the domain-specific metadata, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So these are all made available through powerful searches, and it allows really fine-grained access control, so you can control which collaborator of yours has access to which components of your data sets, and it uses Globus for data movement. It is the most performant mode of movement for very large-scale data sets, and that's what we use at the OLCF and other facilities as well. And we also use Globus for authentication. So this is for federated identity management, which essentially lowers the barrier for adding more facilities to the data-fed network as people want to opt in and move forward. So really quickly, this figure on the left-hand side shows 2 main components. I've just shown the core components that make up the core services of DataFed, and one example of the DataFed repository. So on the top left, the core components that make up the DataFed are the control servers, or rather the command and control servers, the web servers that spin up the web portal, the database that keeps track of all the metadata for each of the records, the users, and so on and so forth. And DataFed handles authorization, concurrency control, access control, etc. On the bottom left, like I mentioned, I've shown a schematic of what a data-fed data repository looks like. These are the ones which are located at each of the facilities in the schematic that I showed earlier. The data-fed can work on practically any file system as long as it is supported by Globus, whether it's an S3 object store or whatever it is, or even a bunch of hard drives. The raw binary data would always stay in the repository, and the people who own the repository would own the data, and only the metadata information would be stored in the data-fed database. So here are the two ways in which you could potentially use data-fed. These are the two interfaces. The first one on the left-hand side is the modern web application through which you can organize, share, and search data. Alternatively, you also have this command line interface and a Python package, which is what I tend to use the most for interactive and non-interactive scripting. And this is something which you could use for staging datasets in a remote compute facility, such as a Summit or something, to go grab all the datasets you want to perform some data analytics. Also, data-fed, like I mentioned, captures general metadata, such as like the owner, the repository, where it's located, the size, and so on and so forth. In addition, importantly, for scientists such as myself, it also captures scientific metadata. And what I like about data-fed is that it allows me to essentially have an arbitrary tree of metadata, and I can use string, numeric, and array values for my key value pairs of metadata. And the entire thing, both the generic and the domain-specific metadata, is searchable. And eventually, there are plans to incorporate community-defined schemas, which will facilitate a whole lot of other things, such as faceted searches, and so on and so forth. And importantly, what I want to point out is, if you have all the metadata captured so beautifully, you don't need to do things like this, wherein you capture the metadata into the file paths itself. So that's a problem that we don't need to suffer anymore. Because all the data and metadata are nicely indexed, you can indeed facilitate really complex searches, things which you simply can't do today with the tools that we use, such as a regular Linux file system or a Windows File Explorer, for example. And here I've shown an example of how you could construct really complex queries and search for data. Another really, really cool feature about of data-fed is that it facilitates provenance capture. And here we can see our data set, a central data set right here, and the fact that it depends on two other data sets on the top, and that two other analyses or subcomponents or subproducts of the data were then created here, and so on and so forth. So it basically captures all sorts of provenance, such as children of, parent of, and component of, and derived from, and deprecated, or something like that. So you can even tell people down the chain that, hey, don't use this particular data record because it is deprecated, or there's a newer version, or it's incorrect, or something like that. So there's a whole lot of really rich metadata and provenance capture that data-fed offers that I haven't seen anything else offer like this before. Now I want to talk about three very popular and high-level use cases, if you will, of where the data-fed and the data infrastructure in general that we've been proposing, how that fits into the three modes of scientific research. The first one I'm going to talk about are simulation and modeling. And on the top, I have what I'd like to call some pseudocode of the amount of effort it takes and the simplicity, effectively, of enabling or incorporating data-fed into simulations and modeling runs. So, so in line one, what you do is essentially you say data-fed, data get, my input parameters. So you have all the parameters necessary for running a simulation. In line two, you actually run the simulation using these input parameters, and then either you can capture the context from your experiments from the parameter file that was downloaded, or you can extract metadata from the results of of the simulation, and it takes all of one line, as shown in line 4, to create the record, provide the context regarding the experiment, and provide the results of the simulation in one line. So I also wanted to point out a few salient points, which are in line 1, there is a data-fed allows you to unambiguously identify input files. And you can do all sorts of things, such as do parameter sweeps, and data-fed will help you capture the different parameters that are associated with each of your parameter sweeps. And importantly, This will allow people to assemble very large and richly annotated data collections important for training deep learning models for surrogate models, if you will, for simulations.
5 minutes left in the session.
Okay, almost done. Thanks. The next thing I want to jump into is applications into data analytics or artificial intelligence. Similarly, we can go grab not just the input parameters, but also the training collection. And here I wanted to point out one really cool feature, which is that DataFed allows you to grab data from multiple different repositories that could be located in Argonne, in Berkeley, in Oak Ridge, or somewhere in Switzerland, etc., and put it all in one place. And the user doesn't have to worry about where the data was located. They're very complex security paradigms that need to be traversed and so on and so forth. So all the data could be collaboratively assembled and then staged at any compute facility for AI applications. And as I mentioned, for experimental and observational sciences, the data gateway does most of the data ingest job. It helps you capture data and metadata. And like I said, DataFed helps you manage your data, and we can have a Jupyter Hub that helps facilitate data analytics. And through all this, we can facilitate multi-user, multimodal, and multi-instrument data correlations. And with this, I just want to summarize by saying that this is our approach to facilitating reproducibility in science by thoroughly and capturing or facilitating data management in an end-to-end manner in a federated way. And with this, I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Oh, sorry. This was funded by the OLCF and partly by CADES as well.